In our legal matters feature, we talked to Aslam Moolla, attorney at Moolla Attorneys Incorporated, about opening law to the public. Yeah, you don't always need a lawyer, and we're going to be having a conversation about law DIY style. You know, the types of law that one can do for themselves, and what you need to know. So, in other words, there are certain areas of the law that you can do yourself without the assistance of an attorney. Not always advisable, but of course there are such spaces where you can actually exercise the law yourself without the use of an attorney. And Aslam Moolla is going to help us understand that space a little bit better. What can you do and what you can't do?
Legal Matters.
13 minutes after 8 o'clock, and Aslam Moolla is my guest, attorney at Moolla Attorneys. Aslam, thank you so much for joining us. I really appreciate your time, sir.
Hi, Aubrey. Thank you for having me on the show.
Much appreciated. Law DIY style, Aslam? I mean, that just makes me a little bit scared that we would even be thinking about a situation where we could broach the law without the assistance of attorneys. But it appears there are areas of the law that if we are educated enough, even without having to be lawyers, we can do something about ourselves. Tell me about this.
Sure. I think it's an interesting topic to be talking about. The reason why is because now we are living in the information age, Aubrey, and heading very soon, obviously, into the artificial intelligence age. And with the information age, what I mean by that statement is that information is so easily available, literally at our fingertips.
Yeah.
Any person can pick up a smartphone, Google a topic of law, and find information that would, in the past, 30, 40, 50 years ago, that information would be located within a professional's mind. So I believe that with such easy access to information, it gives people an opportunity to take some preliminary steps to help themselves in a legal matter. Having said that, there are some matters which are fairly complicated and a person would need a lawyer for. For example, a criminal matter or a complicated divorce. However, other matters, for instance, opening up a case at the CCMA or getting a protection order, things that people can do, they have better information at their fingertips now, Aubrey, as compared to the past. So I think that would frame the context of our discussion tonight.
Indeed. Give us a call, 011-883-0702. As I speak to Aslam Moolla, attorney at Moolla Attorneys, we are investigating the feasibility of you attempting to represent yourself in certain legal matters. And I think I do agree with the idea that we are now exposed to far more information. The question, Aslam, would then be, do we know which questions to ask to access the information that already exists at the end of our fingers, as you put it, to be able to get the right answers and to be able to do with the information what we need done in law?
That is a good question, Aubrey. And I think what we need to do is understand on a very broad overview, when someone thinks about the law, usually they have a conception based from TV. They watch TV shows or they've had some prior experience with a lawyer, etc. But the law, Aubrey, is a very, very broad field. For example, if you talk about medicine, there's different facets to medicine. There's optometry, dentistry, art surgery. There's very different aspects. In the same way, the law affects every area of our life. As you can then imagine, there's wide varieties of the law. Now, once we have that understanding, Aubrey, we then need to delve down and say, okay, fine. How does self-representation fit in? Self-representation would fit in where we break down some aspects of the law which are, in inverted commas, common and are not that complex.
Yeah.
Now, what is that? When we say common and not that complex, for instance, let's take an aspect where someone wants to open up a CCMA case.
Yeah.
Now, South Africa does unfortunately have a high unemployment rate. The CCMA is a mechanism for people to resolve employment disputes.
Yeah.
Now, even though the CCMA rules provide for a lawyer to represent you on application, a person does not necessarily need a lawyer to go there. I mean, the processes are available online, and the documents can be even filled in online, etc. As compared to, for instance, if someone wants to argue about the right to housing, which is a fairly complicated right under the Constitution, and you would need to approach a higher court of law, pleadings would have to be drafted, etc., etc. So what it comes down to, Aubrey, is a person has to use their discretion to understand for themselves. My self-treatment, is it similar to taking for instance, home medication to resolve a short-term illness, or do I need surgery where I need to consult a lawyer, etc.? If you get the analogy.
Yeah. Yeah, no, I do. And I suppose it would require an understanding, at least a rudimentary understanding, of what medicine can I go get over the counter at the pharmacy versus having to go and see a doctor who will then give me a prescription to go and get medicine at the pharmacy versus going to a hospital, going to need specialist treatment. So I think I get the analogy, Aslam.
Yes, Aubrey.
Okay, go ahead.
So how does this actually practically help someone? Whenever I do interviews or put out videos on the internet, I always think to myself, what does this practically mean for someone, and how does it help somebody? So if our listeners are thinking to themselves, okay, what does he mean, and what do I do in my situation? So you've got to step back and think to yourself, the legal situation that you're in, the legal problem that you're in. Have you tried looking for information online, firstly? Now, remember, the information that you're going to get online is not legal advice. It's of a general nature, so it's not going to be information that you can use that's specifically tailored to you. Just like how if you went online and you typed in headache, fever, and you get a whole bunch of symptoms, and invariably it might point to cancer as usual, you're not going to go and think to yourself, now you've got cancer. So in the same way, online research can only give you some kind of guidance. But from there, Aubrey, you can then decide and say, okay, it looks like I'm going to need a lawyer who does labor law, or I'm going to need a lawyer who specializes in property law.
Yeah.
I think a huge misconception right now, Aubrey, is people think all lawyers are the same. Yes, we tend to have the same degree in LLB. However, lawyers also tend to specialize, and I think the most effective representation a person can get is if he goes to a specialist or she goes to a specialist, as opposed just to going and seeing a lawyer who a friend recommended, etc.
Yeah. All right, give us a call. I'd love to hear from those of you who have represented yourselves in certain legal matters. What was the process? How did it work? And what was the result? I'd love to hear that part of your story. The number to dial is 011-883-0702, 021-446-0567. The law is not always intuitive, Aslam, if I could say so. In fact, in some cases it feels very counterintuitive. And we who are lay perhaps to the deeper tenets of the law sometimes approach the law from a position of even a scant understanding of what some might call natural justice. And then when we get to how the law functions and the provisions of the law, we find that perhaps we might not have understood it as easily or as well as we thought we did, based on usually the position I find myself, where I feel wronged, where I feel, but then when the law is to be applied, it tends to do strange things, especially if I don't have the funds, where I have to go and do things myself. Is there anything you can say about that, about the fact that the law is a world all on its own and is not guided by our own emotional reactions to a particular event that may have been negative to us, that there are other considerations that we need to understand in order for the law to work for us?
Yes, that's a very good question, Aubrey. And I think a very brief understanding and idea of how the law has been shaped might help the listeners. So our system is based on the common law system. And what that means is that we've inherited a system of rules called the Roman Dutch rules, and also mixed in with the UK common law system. Now, traditionally, when we talk about the law, it seems like a scary topic. It seems like this very imposing idea of people dressed in suits, going to court, saying objection, cross-examining people, and this whole bunch of this elite status. And it is, most definitely. I mean, to become a lawyer, you need to study for 4 years, you need to do 2 years of articles, you need to write exams, professional exams, you need to be accredited. That's all there. But remember, the point of the law is very much to bring as close as possible justice between people. Also to establish some common set of rules between people. You with me, Aubrey?
Yeah.
So in respect of that, now when we talk about how the law has been developed, and you say, no, it can be counterintuitive, this is where the English law in particular has had some influence. So in the past, I'm talking about a good couple of 100 years ago, there was a system called common law. Common law means decisions that are made by judges are usually abided by. In other words, if a judge had made a decision on a similar set of facts, then in the future we can anticipate that the same set of facts will arrive to a similar decision. It's called a precedent-based decision. It provides certainty in the law, it provides clarity, etc. Now, what we found in the past, Aubrey, was, I'm talking about a couple of 100 years ago, was that people would say, look, the common law is too harsh. In other words, this precedent-based system, this system where we arrive at decisions because the facts are similar to previous set of facts, sometimes it would produce an inequality. In other words, it wouldn't produce a fair and just result. It wouldn't produce an intuitive result. As a result, the law, in the English law in particular, developed this new system called equity. Now, equity means that a judge will look at a particular set of facts and circumstances to arrive at a particular remedy that will help that particular person, irrespective of what the precedent has to say. Now, that's very powerful. The reason why that's powerful is because all of a sudden you have concepts of fairness and justice, irrespective of what happened in previous cases of a similar nature.
Yes.
Now, how does this help someone who's sitting and listening and saying, listen, I've got a problem. Do I represent myself? I don't even know what equity is. I don't know what the common law is. Clearly, I need a lawyer. For some things, you do need a lawyer. I mean, you don't understand the procedures. You don't understand the documents that need to be drafted, house service and filing. However, what you can do is get started on the process. Go to YouTube. Type out some information on YouTube. Go onto social media. Go to the internet. You can get some basic information, Aubrey, and from there, you are more empowered to take the next step.
I'm going to take some calls on 011-883-0702 from listeners who have had the experience of broaching the law themselves. I've got some questions from listeners about certain aspects of the law as it pertains to a particular matter that they're involved in, Aslam. So perhaps let me start off with the calls. Anonymous is in Johannesburg. Hi, Anonymous.
Gentlemen, how are you doing?
Very good, thank you, Anonymous. Tell us what your journey was like.
You know, I was divorced and I was the defendant. And at the time I was unemployed. I couldn't even afford a lawyer. So I went through to the internet. I learned how to type a plea. And then I think I probably typed it more than 50 times. And I reread it and I corrected it and I rewrote it and whatever. But the divorce went well. There was no fighting. And I'm glad I didn't get any representation. But what I want to find out from your guest is I felt that the law was actually on my side because I was treated like a layman. I mean, the judge was so patient with me to a point where she kept on saying, "You're doing well. When I think you need representation, I'm going to let you know. But for now, you can continue." And I felt really, really protected. And I'm not sure if it's just the feeling that I have or it's reality.
So because that's what I was going to ask, Anonymous, and I'll get Aslam to respond. But you didn't feel a sense of antagonism from the judge or the magistrate. You felt accommodated. You felt as though your matter was truly being heard. It wasn't just a matter of being pushed aside because you were not part of the fraternity, as it were. You really felt like your matter was being heard.
I really felt like that, and
Wow.
I felt like because I didn't have anybody representing me,
Yeah.
I felt the judge took it upon herself to say, "I am going to assist to make sure that your rights are protected."
And you say judge, so this happened at the High Court?
It happened in the South Gauteng High Court. Yes.
Nice.
So,
Wow.
So it took a while, but I felt the first time I was so afraid.
Yeah,
But
yeah,
as
yeah.
it went on, I relaxed a bit, and the judge kept on saying, "You're doing well. I'm gonna let you know if you need representation. We're gonna give you time to go and get advice, get legal representation. But for now, you're doing okay. You can continue."
Wow.
And every time I would appear, she would reassure me that I'm still on the right path, and
And how
so
long?
I really
how
felt-
long? How long was the matter heard in court for?
I think we went to court for about 2 years because every time they
Wow.
would postpone it, it would postpone for like almost a year, so because the roll was like full. So I think we appeared about 4, maybe 5 times.
Aslam? Wow. I mean, that for me is quite revelatory because I would have expected that the legal fraternity is a closed fraternity, that even the magistrates would want to be addressed. Magistrates, judges would want to be addressed by people who have some understanding, at least some sort of credential in the law space. Anonymous's experience was completely different.
Mm-hmm. If I can just chip in here, Aubrey.
Yeah, go ahead, Aslam.
From my, thank you for that, Anonymous. Maybe you should even consider a career in law after that experience. My understanding of it is, generally, I find that in my experience, Aubrey, courts are not adverse to self-represented litigants. In other words, if a person comes before court and they come with open hands and they say, "Listen, I'm in this difficulty, I'm in this legal conundrum, I don't know what to do, but I know I have rights," there's going to be some form of assistance that a judge will give you.
Yeah.
However, I think what listeners need to understand, however, is that a court is meant to be a neutral arbiter of disputes. And what that means is that if you would imagine a cricket match or a soccer match, the ideal role of a court is to sit as a referee or an umpire between the two parties.
Yeah.
It's not meant for the court to get involved and assist one party, etc., because that would then create an apprehension of bias and things of that nature. So we must also bear that in mind, that anyone who's going through a legal problem and you can't afford a lawyer, there are other options for you. We've got, now you mentioned Moolla attorneys, but we've got a specialist company called Legal Leaders. And the purpose of that company is legal education. Now, I'm not talking about an LLB or something. I'm talking about educating members of the public on how they can represent themselves.
Yeah.
That's why I'm on the show today.
Yeah.
So I'm actually not here from Moolla attorneys. I'm here from Legal Leaders, which is a separate company that educates people on how to represent themselves. So as you can see, it is something I'm very passionate about, something I believe in. So going back to anonymous, I think it also depends on your case. I think if it is a relatively straightforward case, then you can do it, depending on the facts of your case.
Yeah. Let's take a call from Selma in Rudaport. Hi, Selma.
Oh, hi, Aubrey. I actually have done two different things. The one was where I had a civil case against somebody that wouldn't be...
Hello, Selma, are you there? Oh, Ntateng, let's see if we can't get Selma back on the line. Here's a message from Anonymous. Another Anonymous says, "Hi, Aubrey, I need help, please. How do I proceed with my divorce matter? My estranged husband filed in 2013 but refuses to sign the agreement. He has depleted the matrimonial assets, so there is nothing left to fight for. All I want is for this matter to be resolved. Is there anything I can do myself?" And that's from Anonymous. Aslam?
You know, those are the ones that are really not just sad, but also heartbreaking, Aubrey. The reason why is because when a person gets married, usually the last thing on their mind is a divorce.
Yeah.
And when these things happen, we often find children are involved, we find assets are involved, and the assets are being depleted. So the challenge with divorce cases and self-representation, in my view, Aubrey, here's the recipe. If you are married out of community or property and you have no children, it's best to be self-represented because it's a relatively simple divorce.
Yeah.
That means if you have an anti-nuptial contract and you don't have any kids, it's just for you and your partner to sit down and say, hey, listen, I want to, let's end this relationship. It's not working out. You go your way, you go my way.
Sure.
There's no splitting of the assets, etc., because it's an anti-nuptial.
Yeah.
However, Aubrey, if there is a marriage in community of property, which means that the parties didn't sign an anti-nuptial and there are minor children from that relationship, it becomes a bit more complicated. The reason why is because we need someone like the family advocate to endorse the new living arrangements.
Yeah.
You know, you need the affairs of the children to be looked after. It still can be done on your own, but you need some form of legal guidance.
Yeah.
Now, that's where our material on our website, Legal Leaders, can help because...
Oh, I've just lost Aslam. Perhaps we could take a break if we had the... the number to dial is 011-883-0702. And, of course, if you're in Cape Town, it's 021-446-0567. We're talking about the degrees of complicatedness of cases, which would determine whether or not you are able to do a particular case yourself or not. Aslam is back. Aslam, you were still talking about the levels of complicatedness of various cases that would either require a legal representative or that you could do yourself.
Yes. So going back to our divorce analogy, Aubrey, because that seems to be the most common query that we're getting. If you are married in community of property with no anti-nuptial contract and you have minor children, it's best you get some form of legal advice. That's on the complicated scale, that's like 7 and upwards. If you're married with an antenuptial and there's no minor children, then you can go to your nearest regional magistrate's court. Regional magistrate's court, and you can go to the front desk and there's information forms which you can easily fill in, and there is some guidance there. But like I said, it depends on the facts of your particular case.
Yeah, yeah. All right. Let's speak to Selma in Rudaport. Hi, Selma.
Hello, Audrey. Yes, as I was saying before, not quite sure where I got disconnected. I actually had a civil
You had
case.
two cases, yeah.
Yeah, that's right. The one of the civil case that I took to the small claims court, they were very, very helpful in telling me what forms I needed. They put it in the court roll. They told me that there were different sheriffs for different areas and which one is where and what is the address. And so I drew up my own declaration and everything, because I used to years ago work at a lawyer's place for a senior partner, so I sort of knew, how lawyer speak was done and all that. But anyway, never mind. No, not that I worked here for long. It was only for about 6 months. Anyway, so what happened was, because I had all the documentation and the other person had basically no documentation to say that, she could fight the case, I won it hands down in one appearance, which was great.
Wow.
Then also, once my, just say a family member of mine passed away, he made me his executrix because he had no children whatsoever, and his first wife had died, his second wife he got divorced from, and he was just living with somebody who he didn't think would be reliable, mentally to be able to handle something like that. As it happened, he, in the end, his pension and all that had sort of been depleted so much through the years. He was in his 80s when he passed. So what happened was I phoned a lawyer and he said, "Yeah, we'll do it, of course." And remember, he trusted you to sort out his stuff. Okay, what do you got? 3,000 rand. I said, he hasn't even got that much left in his bank account. Well, okay, he had a little bit more, but
yeah.
So then a friend of mine, or ex-colleague of mine actually, said to me, at the time she was a colleague, she said, "You know what? You can read yourself to the master's office. They'll help you as long as there are no fixed property involved." I said, "No, he's basically got nothing left."
Yeah.
So she said, "Go for it." So I phoned them up and they emailed me the forms that would pertain to this specific case. Filled it all in, made an appointment to go and see, and got the documents that they said you had to have with you, like their certificate, ID, blah, blah. Went in, made an appointment, went to their office in Johannesburg. The lady was extremely helpful. She said, "Okay, you've got to advertise it in the newspaper, but if you don't get any creditors coming forward, then you're home free. If creditors come forward, then unfortunately you're going to have to go for an attorney." And it's now 12 years later, no complications.
Selma and Rudaport, thanks very much for that. Aslam, I suppose this is evidence of the fact, 2 calls already where people have successfully handled their own legal matters. I want to get a sense from you. You'd already started to explain that there are certain cases that it would be better for you to have legal assistance from a professional. But there are certain cases that you can do based on how, the facts and based on perhaps the simplicity of the case. Give me a sense on what are some of the types of legal matters that you would be comfortable to say to our listeners, this you can do yourself with a little bit of reading, a little bit of coaching, you could do this yourself. And these are not the kinds of cases you should try to approach yourself because of this, and that. Could you help us out with that?
Sure. It's a good question, Aubrey. The challenge with the question is within every field of law, there's a little niggly that can actually come back to bite you.
Yeah.
Let me give you an example. Let's take an employment contract. Okay? Now, you might say, "Aslam, this is completely counterintuitive to the show," but that's the reality. Almost everyone at some point in their life is going to sign an employment contract. They're going to have some kind of relationship, either at work or whatever it is. And usually we find employment contracts are quite straightforward. Working hours, attire, responsibilities, leave, etc. But there's one clause in there, Aubrey, that can really come back to bite you. And that clause is called a restraint of trade.
Oh, yeah.
What that means is that if a person signs this employment contract, they are restrained from working for a competitor or working for themselves in the industry for maybe up to a year in KZN, in Gauteng, wherever. Now, if a person is not legally aware of that and they go ahead and sign the restraint, the reality is that a court would hold them liable to that restraint because they signed the contract. Now, like I said, you're going to say, well, Aslam, I thought you said we don't need lawyers.
Yeah.
Why are you telling me all of this? You're scaring me. Now I have to go and see a lawyer.
Yeah.
But the reality of it is, these are the things that it's very difficult for me to point out and say, you don't worry about a lease agreement. Just go ahead and do a little research on the internet. Ultimately, when it comes to self-representation, I think a person should use their discretion based on the circumstances that they are in.
Yeah.
It's always advisable to get some kind of legal assistance. And I think there's options like legal aid now, if finance is an issue. Also, legal insurance companies that offer different insurance platforms like medical aids would offer. Use those options.
Yeah.
But if you are really caught between a rock and a hard place and you cannot go ahead with a lawyer, then I think a person should, at the very least, do some online research. Now, what are no-go areas for self-representation? When I say no-go, I mean at no circumstances should a person represent themselves. Number one, any criminal matter. Why is that important? If a person is accused of a crime and they are found guilty, it goes on their criminal record. That would stay on your record for a very long time.
Yeah.
It has a serious consequence to you. Let's compare that to maybe filling in a lease agreement, which you can download online and read the terms. You wouldn't really need a lawyer for the latter. But criminal matters, I always advise clients, don't take a chance. Rather, have a lawyer on your side.
Yeah.
Number two, I think issues that are relating to aspects of serious claims. So, for instance, medical malpractice or things that really affect, basically, the higher the consequence to you. I think this is the simple test, Aubrey.
Yes.
The higher and the more serious the consequence to you and your life or the lives of your loved ones,
Yes.
go get some legal advice.
Yeah.
The lower the risk, then it's almost like medical treatment then in a way. Aubrey.
Sure. No, I think the principles are very, very similar, Aslam, that, the higher the risk, rather than get some professional assistance, the lower the risk, then perhaps you can broach the subject yourself. Let me take another call from Anonymous in Johannesburg. Hi, Anonymous.
Well, are you well?
I'm well, Anonymous. Go ahead, sir.
Good. Evening to your guest as well.
Yeah.
Well, I just wanted to contribute in terms of the topic you're having. My issue is slightly different in a sense that I had a very sensitive HR matter, which I obviously discussed with a colleague of mine from a particular workplace that I had. And I also had a buddy, which was a lawyer, which also advised me. And the whole thing seemed straightforward, bro, because I had all the documentation in place and everything that goes with that. But for some reason, the people I was consulting and discussing the matter with the sensitive HR matter, didn't listen to me until I lawyered up. So sometimes people just want to see you lawyer up before they even give you a chance to talk. So what do we do in cases like that?
Absolutely. And I suppose the intimidation of the idea that you're resourced enough to have a lawyer sometimes can make those that are your legal adversaries realize that you're willing to actually go the whole hog, yeah?
Yeah, that's the problem, bro. And Ashraf will also agree with me. They don't come cheap as well.
Oh, yeah. All right, let's hear about that. I mean, as a strategy, Aslam, in a legal battle, just to lawyer up, I mean, to have a couple of Aslams walking into a room, I mean, that in itself as a mind game, as a strategy, if you're in a legal bind, if I've got you on my side and some of your colleagues, you know, my legal adversary would probably think twice about messing with me, yeah?
Definitely, it is. It's the reality also of the battle. You know, the art of war is very much in litigation as well. And what I mean by that is, when two parties go into litigation, it is very much a war. In other words, it's a war of attrition.
Sure.
And usually the attrition is finances and time, energy, emotions to get some kind of outcome. Now, the side with the biggest army and the best weapons already has a mental impact on the other side.
Yeah.
However, we know of stories in history where a small force defeated the big army, David and Goliath scenario, etc. So
the 300 Spartans.
Exactly. So in the same way, Aubrey,
yeah,
you know, I think if I look at my own personal experience, I've had cases against opponents to me that were considered to be much more senior, and I turned out victorious on the case. Not because I had some gifted skills which they didn't have. The reason why I won that particular case is because the facts and the law were on my side.
Yeah.
And we always talk about this in our team meetings at the office, where we say it doesn't matter which firm is on the other side or which company is on the other side. What matters is where are we on the facts and where are we on the law. If we know where we are on the facts and the law, we can go into any courtroom, put that on the table, and let the judge decide. So in the same way, yes, intimidation can be a factor, especially if you are self-represented. Let's take a divorce case. One party might be represented, the other party might not be represented.
That's right.
So what happens there? Must you lawyer up just because your ex-spouse is lawyering up? No, you don't have to if you don't have the financial resources. However, what you need to do is research the law. What you need to do is call in a few favors. What you need to do is get some information and remember to research the facts and the law. And if it's on your side, then it doesn't matter who's on the other side. The judge will make a decision.
Anonymous just spoke about an HR situation, and many questions arising following that question. On Twitter, Hussein says, we've just come out of a meeting and we were told that we were getting a 15% salary deduction since the company is not doing well. Is this legal? No signed document, says Hussein. And again, I'm asking this question apropos what you've just said about the fact that the facts and the law were on your side, even though your adversaries were better, I don't know, they were more senior, perhaps even better qualified, and whatever the story might be. In a situation such as what Hussein is talking of, where company calls people in and says, guys, this company is not doing well, we have to have a 15% reduction in salary. Is that a legal matter? Is that a matter that can be approached legalistically, or is it a matter of, you know, how do we help each other here in this particular situation? But the direct question is this legal for a company to announce that, guys, we can't afford to pay you as we have, we're going to go down by 15% in your salaries? I mean, how do you deal with that question, Aslam?
Sure. Without actually giving any specific legal advice, because I didn't look at any document, what I would say, Aubrey, is that a company cannot make unilateral changes to the workplace. What that means is that the company cannot decide all of a sudden to cut 15% or make you work an extra day or change your lunch break, it must be done in consultation. So that's the basic legal provision.
Yeah.
Now, what can the parties do in the situation? What can those group of employees do? And I think this is where collective bargaining comes into play, Aubrey. Those employees who were sitting in the boardroom and received those notices, why don't they pitch together some monies and as a collective go and see a labor lawyer privately? You know, I think even if you take a consultation rate of 1,500 rand and it is 10 employees, it's 150 rand.
Yeah.
You know, and you all go there, or even you elect a spokesperson and you have the other employees listen in via WhatsApp video call. There's technology today. And maybe that is the hybrid between self-representation and full legal representation.
Yeah.
It's a hybrid form of parties pooling their resources together and saying, how can we help ourselves at the same time without, costing an arm and a leg?
Wow. All right, let's take another call from another Anonymous. Hi, Anonymous. Go ahead.
Hi, Obi. How are you?
I'm very good, thanks, bro. What's on your mind?
I'm all right, thank you, Obi. So I've represented myself, I think, for 5 years, since 2017 in the Children's Court. I have to say, look, from a legal perspective, the Children's Court made it a bit easier, but there's a couple of layers that you need to embody. One, you have to be prepared. So your guest is quite right. You need to go online, you need to go research. I know that I researched online and I went into the courts themselves and I inquired on the legal aspect.
What sort of questions did you ask, Anonymous? I think for me that's very, very important, because I think I agree with everybody, it's particularly what Aslam was saying, that the information is there. I worry sometimes about whether or not I would know what question to ask, because I don't know what I don't know, right?
So yeah, I don't know what I don't know, but the first definition is more internal. So I need to understand, what do I want, first of all. And then when I went in, the question was, or the statement was, this is what I want. What are my rights in this accord? And then immediately they start phrasing it for you in terms of what your rights are and what are the legal corners to it.
Yes.
So then you start becoming a bit more informed. But there's other aspects to self-representation which is very challenging and very important.
Yes.
And that is the emotional side.
Yeah.
Now, it's easy to represent yourself. Now, emotional can either come from confidence or just from the magnitude of what you're looking at.
Yeah.
I know that recently I was in court. I've represented myself for 5 years. Take note. In the recent one, I was broken down in tears for the longest trying to speak. Now, you're trying to speak. At least the Children's Court does not just want you to speak into legal.
Yeah.
It wants you to speak into what you want, and you're representing yourself on the facts of what has happened. Now, in some courts, you can speak into, for example, the legal, but once you go into the facts, I understand the facts far better.
Yes.
Even my attorney can understand it,
Yeah.
or anybody who's going to represent me. But the emotional part of it is very difficult, and the preparation for it is not easy most of the time.
Yeah.
And even maybe when you're going to divorce, for example, the emotional aspect is quite daunting.
Wow. Yeah.
Because now you have to speak into something that you didn't anticipate will break.
Yeah.
And you are fighting against either somebody that you once had a good space with, and you now recognize it's a fight.
Oh, yeah.
It's
No, I get it, man. I get exactly what you're saying. And I think that's probably why in certain or in such situations it is better to have an objective arm's length relationship with a particular matter through a lawyer than to do it yourself. But how did you handle it, Anonymous? How did you handle that?
So the emotional side, what I handled was I consulted.
Oh, I've lost Anonymous. But a critical and very important aspect of the law, Aslam, and that's probably why we have lawyers, because they're not emotionally involved in our matters. But once you do, how do you even prepare yourself for that emotional distance that's required in order for you not to break down at a critical point?
You know, Aubrey, I'm glad that Anonymous actually brought that up. The reason why is because that is one of the most common things that we see in practice, which is people who represent themselves identifying issues which are not legally relevant, but relevant to them personally. So what is an example of that? An example could be a form of unfair dismissal where a person was dismissed from the workplace for a misconduct. For instance, they didn't put the coffee machine back, or they took too much of coffee, or whatever it is. And they might identify a dispute that they had, an argument that they had with the manager 3 weeks ago. And that's the emotional thing that's sitting with them. Whereas in reality, what they were dismissed for was the coffee issue. So that's where the emotions come into play. The objectivity of a person to see the real issue, the real legal issue, from the emotional issue. And I think that is, you are right, that's the value of a lawyer. Because a lawyer can sit down and say, hold on now, I agree with you that made you upset. However, that's not relevant to the case.
To the case at a legal level, sure. Listen,
so
Aslam,
that is a very relevant issue.
We've run out of time. I mean, we could keep talking about this matter for the longest time, and I'm sure we'll have other opportunities to do so. How do people get in touch with you from an attorney at Moolla Attorneys perspective, and also legal, what's the other organization?
Legal Leaders.
Legal,
so we've got two organizations, Aubrey. Moolla Attorneys Incorporated, that's a law firm that provides legal services. So if you just go on to Google and you type in Moolla Attorneys, MOOLLA. Alternatively, if you want self-help, then you go and type in Legal Leaders. Legal Leaders is a education-based company. It does not offer legal services. So that's the distinction. So, Aubrey, the next time you invite me, I think I'd be happy to do segments where we do particular areas of law. For instance, unfair dismissal, CCMA, divorce, and we covered that in 45 minutes.
Aslam Moolla, thank you so much for joining us, and indeed, that would be most useful. Let's take a break. When we come back, Eyewitness News.
The Midday Report. Weekdays, 12 to 1.